So let's talk about how to ideate and come up with product solutions. And then I can take you through a quick case study of a feature that we built at Ola that can demonstrate how to design an MVP, how to take it up from the MVP or the minimum viable product version up to full rollout, what kind of metrics are to be tracked, and what kind of learning or feedback does the product manager receive from the market during this entire cycle. Right. With that background, let's come to this case study of the Ola Queued Allotment and feature and take a look at how it was taken from MVP to full rollout. So this case study is about this message that you might have seen on the Ola app, if you've used it anytime in the last several years, which says your driver is completing a ride and will reach you shortly. Right? Now, prior to this feature rolling out, users would always get an empty cab. They would hit book on their Ola app, and they would always be assigned an empty cab, even if it was a little far away and there was another cab dropping someone nearby. Right? After this feature, that situation was changed. Now, what were some of the business reasons driving this? Right? Or why did we come up with such a feature requirement at all? Right? So if you take a look at Ola's capacity utilization, this is around 2016. This is around 2016, 2017. The picture may have changed since then. The capacity distribution looked a little like this.
Okay.
So what is Ola's capacity? Say you have 1 lakh drivers on Ola's platform, and each of them logs in for 10 hours a day. So Ola as a whole has 10 lakh hours of driver time as capacity on their platform. This is what they are selling to customers, and they want the customers to utilize this time and essentially pay money to Ola for the rides, right? So of this 10 lakh or whatever was the capacity per day at that time, around 46% was idle. That means the drivers were not having a ride, they were just waiting for a ride. Another 46% was utilized. That means the drivers were serving customers and earning revenue for themselves and for the company. Another 7% was dry run. I'll come back to this in a moment. And 1% was wasted. That is, the cab started moving before the ride was cancelled and so on. So, but this is a very negligible amount. Let's forget it for a while. Let's focus on dry run. Dry run is the time or the distance that the driver spends moving from their current location to the pickup location, right? And 7% of the driver's time is apparently spent moving to the pickup location. During that time, they are not earning any revenue because the previous passenger has already gotten off from the car. The next passenger, the waiting passenger who has made the booking, has not yet sat in the car, so they are not paying yet. So nobody's paying for that time or that distance. And that distance on average in a city like Bangalore was about 2.1 kilometers, which is fairly high, right? Obviously, in an operations intensive business like this, the core target is to try and reduce the idle time, but this is extremely hard to do, and there were other teams trying to take a crack at this. So we decided to take a crack at dry run and reduce the amount of capacity wasted in dry run. Hopefully, bring it to utilize. It should not so happen that dry run decreases and becomes idle. Right? So this is where we came up with the queued allotment feature. What is it? And why should we as product managers or as the Ola team even bother? Because every 1% improvement in utilization had an impact of 2% reduction in cash burn. So as you know, Ola at that time and even now, they are burning a lot of cash to keep their operations going, to keep their customers engaged and so on. And there is always a focus on how could you develop features to reduce cash burn. The overall company average was such that every 1% improvement in the driver's utilization had a 2x improvement in the cash burn reduction. So this any improvement that you can bring there would be very useful to the company, right? So to sum all that up, the objective of the feature was to reduce dry run, and which was 7% of the capacity and 2.1 kilometers on average. And let's take a look at how the MVP was built and how it was rolled out further.
Yeah.
Right. So we came up with a very simple algorithm. So there is a customer who's requesting a ride at this location. There is a cab at some distance from that customer, and that cab is going to drop their existing customer at this point, right? So they're going to take this ride and come drop the customer at this point, right? So let's allot this cab to this waiting customer so that after they drop the existing customer at this point, they can just take a small detour and go pick up the next customer, right? Otherwise, you would have a cab that is elsewhere, which is free and empty, that getting assigned to this booking, and that would incur a longer dry run. If you see in this case, the dry run is only the red line because the existing customer is utilizing this part of the ride. This is the only dry run, and after the cab reaches here, the remaining part of the ride will be again utilized by the waiting customer, right?
Right.
So very simply, from the booking point, search for a cab in the search radius, which is having a customer who will be dropped off within a drop radius, and allot that cab to the waiting customer. By this, we expect that the dry run would be approximately equal to the drop radius. Why approximately? Because the roads are not straight; they could be curved and whatnot. So approximately equal to the drop radius. So the tighter you control the drop radius, the lower your dry run will be, right? So very simple.
Right.
The total time taken here would be T1 plus T2 plus a buffer, where T1 is the time from the cab's current location to dropping off the current customer, and T2 is the time from the customer's drop-off point to the new pickup point, plus a little buffer at that point of drop-off to exchange cash, generate billing, and so on. This again, as I said, 2016, 2017 was when Jio had not yet taken the entire telecom world by storm, and hence not everyone had data on their mobiles, right? So a lot of billing was generated via SMS, and the primary mode of exchange was for paying this was cash, right? How would we know whether this feature was successful or not? So we defined metrics for success and failure upfront. So the metric for success is that dry run should decrease from where it currently was, and the control metric was that cancellations should not increase significantly. Why could cancellations increase? Because the waiting customer is now being allotted a cab that is busy and could hence take a little longer to reach them than an empty cab that's farther away, right? So possibly cancellations could increase because the customer experience was slightly hampered. The objective was to balance both of these and ensure that cancellations don't rise too much.
So just for the audience sake, could you please go to the previous slide? So, understand, the focus of Ola obviously was to decrease the dry run, which is the key success metric they were looking at. But for product managers, it is also important to look at error scenarios. So cancellations become one of the major error scenarios in almost all the transaction-based platforms, when they need to identify how to reduce or how to optimize the cancellations. And that is why it's a control metric. Thank you. You can go ahead.
Sure. Now, moving on, let's look at how the MVP was developed. The MVP was developed by just building the math of the algorithm in the backend and turning it on one fine day without communicating anything to the customers at all, right? Neither the customers nor the drivers knew that some change was happening. On one fine day, as a product manager, I just told my team, let's build this, and from next Monday, we'll just turn it on in the backend. How would that work? We selected 2 locations in Bangalore with fairly high footfall. So Majestic bus station is a busy central bus station in Bangalore where a lot of inter and intra-city buses come and congregate. And Phoenix Market City Mall is again a busy mall in Whitefield in Bangalore. A lot of footfalls here as well, right? So historically, we saw that a lot of bookings had taken place from these 2 locations, and they were comparatively small geographies, right? Maybe a kilometer by 1 kilometer kind of a rectangle. So we could start with these and find out what was happening in these 2 areas before scaling it up to further parts of Bangalore and then to the rest of the country. So let's skip this for a moment, not to worry. So as we rolled it out for phase 1, we saw a lot of issues, right? But the fact that we were able to contain it to just 2 locations in Bangalore ensured that the feature didn't blow up in our face. What were some of the issues? The issues were cancellations. So the cancellations for the rides allotted with this algorithm were significantly higher than the cancellations of the city in general. So if the city's general cancellation rate was say 20%, the cancellation for this type of ride, the queued allotment rides, was say 50%. That's significantly higher. However, the total number of rides here would be in the few tens, maybe 20, 30, or 40 rides a day. So it was easy to, it didn't hurt the overall cancellation metrics much, but gave us an insight that there is something wrong with the feature as we had released it with no communication to anyone.
Which is the iterative approach you spoke about back in the UFL theory day. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. And here I would like to point out that this is a core requirement or a core activity for every product manager, which is talk to the user, right? You have developed a feature. You might want to define success metrics, failure metrics, many sort of funnel metrics, whatever. What is happening on the field, it is very important for product managers to either go out there and see it themselves, if possible. If not, talk to the end users to ask them what their experience was like. And this is what I did. As I said, for the first couple of weeks, there were 20, 30, 40, 50 rides a day in these two locations. Very easily manageable to call up all of them, especially the ones that had canceled, and ask them, hello, sir, or hello, ma'am, you had booked such a ride, but you canceled it. Why? Can I understand this better? I'm a product manager at Ola, and I'd like to learn more. Right. So you will remember, you will get a lot of
so I would want to talk about here, like you spoke about that, you interviewed people to understand the issues. Right. And I think for the benefit of audience, this is one activity product manager does while they're rolling out a new product, because one, it is a new feature, I would say, because one, it is not very much prevalent in the industry. People do not know how to identify the success and the failure of this feature. And the best way is to roll out a survey, which many IT companies would do, because they might not be able to approach the customer directly. But in this case, it can also be a group interview or a one-on-one interview with the customer. That is how the interviewer or the product manager can know more about the issues which customer faces. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. The emphasis here that I would like to make is that as part of your specification document, you will usually have requirements of what are the reports to be generated, what are the funnel metrics you're measuring, and so on and so forth. But nothing gives you insight like actually talking to the user. It's a very rich and rewarding experience, also quite frustrating, because the users will give you feedback that you can't digest. And getting signal from noise in that case. So for example, when I spoke to some of the users here, one of them said, oh, I changed my mind. Or someone said, oh, I found an auto instead, and hence I canceled. So it's hard for me as a product manager to figure out what feedback is relevant to this feature versus what is just things that are happening in the city and I don't need to worry about them, right? But after you do the data analysis and you are able to sift through the feedback, you get some great insights. So the first one was that the number of cancellations of this particular feature became very high because the customers thought their cabs were not moving in the required direction. So the customer makes a booking, and once they are allotted a cab, they were waiting for the cab to move in their direction. But remember that the cab is serving a different
already occupied.
Yes, so it's moving in a different direction. The waiting customer thought something was wrong and they cancelled. The next is that the waiting customer used to call the cab driver and ask, hello, can you come pick me up here? Now, the cab driver would reply saying, sorry, sir, I have someone in my cab right now. Remember that till the previous day, the customer is used to getting an empty cab. So when the cabbie replies and says, I have someone in my cab right now, the customer assumes that something's gone wrong at Ola's backend and they cancel. The third scenario is that similarly, the customer calls the driver and says, can you come pick me up? The driver says, no, I have a rider in my cab. Could you please cancel because I think something's gone wrong with the algorithm, right? And they ask the customer to cancel, right? And we had one case where the driver thought that their current trip had ended and they were required to go to the waiting customers because the waiting customer said, I have received your car's number plate on my app. I'm waiting for you. So the driver abandoned the current customer, the person who's sitting in the car, saying, "You please get down here in the middle of the street, and I'm going to my next pickup," right? And you can imagine that this current customer was obviously furious. We had to do something to take care of that. And so this is the feedback that we had from phase 1.
Right.
So what did we do in phase 2 to iterate and improve the customer's experience? Well, we decided, let's add a toast message for the customer. What's a toast message? A toast message is something that comes up like this, and it just disappears after a few seconds, say for 3 to 5 seconds, right? So we implemented this and rolled out, and we found that the issue was the customers aren't staring at their screen. They might hit book and then go away to do something else. They might go have breakfast or take a shower or do whatever. So if this notification comes up and disappears, the customer has never seen it. It is equivalent to not informing the customer at all, and the situation is the same as phase 1, right? Yeah. How do you tackle this? One thing we decided was, okay, let's draw this route of the from the cab's current location to the waiting customer's location, and let's add a little marker at the intermediate drop-off location, right? So let's add a route and a marker along with the toast message. This toast message will still appear, stay for 3 seconds, and then disappear, but we'll add the route and the marker as well. When we spoke to our engineering team, the engineering teams told us at that time, again, remember, Android itself was a little immature at that time. The drawing the line, the maps line and the route was an engineering heavy or an engineering challenge and would take a lot of time to do. So could we simplify it in some way? So we decided, okay, let's just drop the route line and just go with this orange marker, right? Which indicates the intermediate drop location. What would happen is there would be this orange marker. This toast message would come up and then disappear. If the user tapped the intermediate drop location marker, that's the orange marker, the toast message would come again, stay for 3 seconds and would disappear. So that the customer would know that these two are connected in some way. When I tap this thing comes up again, right? And I realized that, okay, this seems to be an important position on my map. Let me not worry if the cab is moving in a wrong direction. Let's see what happens, right? And so the cancellations went down significantly, but not low enough to where we wanted. And the last couple of reasons that we found that customers were quoting was that, hey, when Ola says something will take 10 minutes, it often takes 15 minutes or longer. I mentally add 50% to the time that Ola is telling me. So when we used to give an estimate of T1 plus T2 plus a couple of minutes of buffer accurately, customers just added a few minutes as overhead, and they thought, okay, now this is going to take half an hour, let me cancel. Now, this was a very interesting case where a previous product manager had actually found that indicating a wait time of over 9 minutes would cause cancellation, would spike cancellations. So even though Ola's system knew that something is going to take, say, 14 minutes, they would always communicate 9 minutes to the customer. And for the next 5 minutes, the customer would continue to see 9 minutes, and then the timer would start decreasing only after that. This was just an insight that, okay, anything over 9 minutes is going to cause cancellations, right? So that was just a task of being honest with the customer and saying, okay, what the time we are promising you is actually a good promise. We are not trying to fudge the numbers. And once we got better at that, customers started trusting the time that was T1 plus T2 plus a buffer, right? So these were the initial set of changes on the customer side. Now let's take a look at what were the changes on the driver app and how to improve the driver's experience, starting from the first phase where there was no communication to the driver, right? Now, how do you improve the driver's UX, right? Now, one of the issues that we had was that the driver had no idea that something like this was happening in the background. So they would just reach the drop-off location. And remember, this was before internet on phone, right? A lot of things were communicated via APIs and whatnot. So they would often take several minutes before the driver's device could communicate with Ola's backend systems. What would happen is the driver would just log off after the current trip. Now imagine the situation of this waiting customer. They are seeing this cab, which has been promised to them. they're seeing an orange marker here, which says that this cab is going to go here, and the cab is going to reach you shortly. They stare at their screen until the cab reaches here, and because the driver logs off, the cab just disappears. Right? How frustrating it must be for this customer who's waiting. Right? So what did we do? We added a toast notification on the driver app saying, "Hey, your next ride has been allotted."
Right.
The issue with toast notification is the same as with the customer, which is the drivers are driving in traffic and it's noisy and loud and stuff. They are not looking at their screens. The toast notification comes and disappears, and again, it's the same situation as the first phase, which is the driver misses the toast notification. So one thing we could do is try and have a persistent notification on the screen that is info only. Again, this was the time when Android was not as evolved. So push notifications in Android at that time did not support buttons. So you could not have an accept decline kind of button, or even add images, or have that extensible notification that you see for most applications today. All those features of Android notifications were not supported. So our engineering team had to do a bit of research to figure out how we could have a persistent notification that stays on screen and says, "Look, your next ride is allotted, don't go away anywhere." Right? Later, as these capabilities of notifications became richer, we added details of the customer contact and the distance and time to pick up and so on to help the driver navigate. Right? Now, how do you improve the UX for the driver? And this is where I would like to bring to all the participants notice that don't assume that there is a portal which is a supplier facing portal. In Amazon, it could be the Amazon seller portal. For Ola, it's the Ola driver app. For Swiggy and Zomato, it would be the driver or the rider app there. It's obviously reaching a much smaller audience than the B2C portal, which customers like you and I use. But the number of features and the way you think about customers, in this case, the driver is a customer, for that app is exactly the same as the B2C. And those apps are also very feature rich. You have to work on improving the supplier's experience as well, because after all, they are the backbone of your business. If they disappear, your business just collapses, right? So let's take a look at how we improved driver UX for this feature.
Right? So just to enhance the conversation here for the audience. So in most of the in last decade or so, most of the platforms you see, like Ola, we are talking about, and there's Uber and there's e-commerce players like Flipkart, Amazon. We always see most of the time, and we always think about one platform, which is the platform which we as consumers see, but which is only the demand side of the nature. But in business, there's always a supply side. So here, the supply side becomes a driver, and for maybe a Flipkart or Amazon, that would become a marketplace owner who would sell their products to you. So that is where it is very important to have a good experience or a good platform for the supplier side. And in this case, it is the driver. Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ishan. So the first issue was that the driver could not cancel the ride that was being allotted to them via this queued allotment process. So remember, we talked about notifications. The notifications just say that, "Hey, you have been allotted your next ride. Go to this." Whereas if the driver were idle, if the cab was idle and empty, and they received a ride, the driver could choose whether to cancel a ride or not. There are certain policies as to how many rides they can cancel in a day and so on, but at least they have that choice. Here, it is very possible that because of being in a certain location and driving a customer to a different location, even though they have reached their quota for the day, say they have done 13 or 15 rides for the day, they're ready to go home, the algorithm just says, "No, here is your next ride, go," right? And you can't cancel it, right? So one thing we tried to do was add buttons to the push notification that says accept or deny. This required better Android system support that came in later. Now, this is another instance of the insights that you can gain by talking to the customers. In this case, the customer of this app is the driver. So I even remember the gentleman's name. This was a driver called Ganesh in Mumbai, right? I called him and asked, "Hello, we've rolled out this feature. Do you like it? Have you seen it? I knew it had affected him because it was in our ride records. So I asked him, this would have happened today morning at around 9 o'clock. What do you think?" So he said, "Sir, if you are the person who's creating this feature, can you please turn it off? I asked him, what's the issue, right? In fact, I remember he told me that he first ride finished with a drop off inside IIT Bombay, and the next ride started within IIT Bombay, so it was very easy for him to move to the next pickup location. But he asked me to turn off the feature. So when I asked him, why are you so irritated with it? He said, sir, I don't get any time between the rides. If I want to take a break, if I want to have a meal, go to the washroom, have a smoke, or even refuel, there is no time. Your system just keeps on giving me rides back to back, especially in the peak hours of the morning and the evening, right? When people are leaving to office or coming back from work. So this ended up in an experience where the driver would have to, randomly at some point of time, they would have to ask the passenger saying, sir, I need to refuel. Can I go to a petrol pump? And the passenger would obviously get irritated and say, why do you have to do this when I am in the car? Why don't you do it in your downtime? And the driver can't explain that, no, I don't get any downtime. It just keeps, your system just keeps giving me rides back to back, right? So we identified that this was an important problem, and this was not something that we had foreseen. So we did not have metrics or we did not have dashboards to figure out whether the situation is happening. This insight came to us only by talking to the customer, in this case, the driver, right? So we developed a feature enhancement, which was to allow the driver to go offline. So the driver could indicate at the beginning of a ride that I want to go offline after this, after completing this ride. So the system would detect, even if they fall within that search radius, drop radius circles, the system would detect that this driver has indicated they would want to go offline, and hence it would not allot the next ride to them. Rather, as soon as the first ride was completed, they would be automatically taken offline. They would be forced offline. And after the driver has finished, eating or refueling or whatever, they can come back online whenever they want to, right? We then noticed, once we developed this feature enhancement, that people were using go offline. The drivers were using go offline to go home at the end of the day, because they didn't want rides that took them away from their home, because it would be a long commute. They would have to spend a lot of fuel to drive back home. So they were trying to use this go offline and position themselves in certain ways, or accept only certain rides that would take them towards home. So then we decided, okay, why ask the driver to do all of these things? Let's give them a go home feature, which says, at the end of my day, I am done. I want to go home. So the next ride that will be allotted will be one that will take them 70 or 80% of the way to their home. Now, where is their home? We already know that, because when the driver is onboarded onto the platform, they give us their KYC details and their address, so we know where their home location is. So a button that says next ride, it's okay even if they don't earn incentives for that ride, but they'll just earn the ride earnings, but they are taken 70-80% of their way home, and from there it's easier for them to get home. So this was the feature extension that was developed. This, again, drivers further tried to use it to position themselves in strategic portions of the city at peak hours. So at, say, 4 p.m. or 5 p.m., they know they need to go towards the business districts where they can get a lot of rides, or at 10 p.m. in the evening near all the restaurants and pubs and things where they can again get rides to different parts of the city. They try to change their home location to come and position themselves in these places. So we said, okay, why don't we just further extend go home to make it go to? So the driver could say, I want to go to Koramangala at this point of time, maybe at 4 p.m. And the system would try to give them rides that take them closer towards Koramangala, right? So a lot of feature enhancements can happen as you talk to the driver and notice their behavior that they actually perform. Architecture enhancements are more from a technical point of view. Let's work closely with the engineering managers to figure that out. I will skip over that for a moment. And yes, so yeah, let's just skip over
go back to the
Yes. So with this, we come to the end of our slide. Let's do a set of quick questions that I usually hear about this talk, which is, doesn't this algorithm starve a nearby cab? So there might be a cab waiting nearby, and there's another cab that is currently serving someone else and coming close to the drop location. Wouldn't the waiting cab be starved? Now, it's like the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So the fact that the dry run reduced from 2.1 kilometers to about 1.5 kilometers, or even less, 1.2 kilometers, is proof that this thing works. So the empty cabs weren't starving. They were, within a few seconds, they would get another ride which is closer to their current location rather than drive 2-3 kilometers across the city, right? Next question is, what else goes into making an allotment decision? Is it just that you give a booking to the nearest cab or to a cab that's coming like this queued allotment? No, a lot of things go into making an allotment decision. For example, one of the important things would be the product mix. You have micro, mini, prime, and all of these categories of cabs which are more and more premium. Now, say you have a prime cab, which is probably a sedan or a big car, a more expensive car that has been waiting for 2 minutes because it's idle, right? And now there's a user who has requested for a micro or a mini. Now, you can take a decision whether you want to allot that micro or mini ride to this prime cab, which is just waiting, so that you can get some revenue rather than just keep it waiting and starving for a long time. Or are you willing to wait for another couple of minutes and wait for someone to actually make a prime booking, which will earn you higher revenue, right? So how do you want to handle your product mix? It's an important thing that goes into making an allotment decision. There are a lot of fraud checks and balances. So initially, when the algorithms were developed to just give bookings to the nearest cab, we saw that cabbies would stand 100 meters from each other and give rides to each other, right? So then there were minimum distance rules, thresholds that were put into place to ensure that this kind of fraud doesn't take place. So there are a lot of aspects that goes into an allotment decision. It's not only the location, right? The next is, why would you risk customer dissatisfaction by rolling out without any UX? After all, there are a lot of cancellations. This is where the phased rollout comes into play. We rolled out without any UX in just 2 locations, a mall and a bus station in Bangalore. Even if all of them cancel, there will only be 40 or 50 cancellations compared to a couple of lakh bookings in a day, right? A drop in the ocean. So it's extremely important for product managers to roll out features phase by phase. Remember the N going from 1 to N, 1 to several thousand. It's extremely important to roll out features phase by phase rather than just spread it all over your entire consumer base at one go, because there could be unknown things that increase customer dissatisfaction and drop your ratings, right? How did drivers understand that all of these features were available on that platform, and how did they learn about it? There is a driver training module where drivers are where we could upload a video explaining to the drivers in different languages what the feature is, how they're supposed to react to it. And there's even a small questionnaire at the end of the video that drivers need to answer, so that we as the product team understand that the drivers have actually understood what is happening in the feature, right? Last and slightly interesting question that I get is, why is there a difference in the quality of service between Ola and Uber? I don't know whether that difference still exists, but a lot of people have the perception that Uber drivers and Uber's quality of service is slightly better than Ola's. Now, why does this happen? Ola, now this is what brings all the different aspects of running a business and an MBA together. So this comes from Ola's financial policies. What do I mean by that? Ola settles the driver's fees every day, whereas Uber settles the fees of the driver once a week, settles in cash, right? Now, what does this mean? This means that Ola tends to attract drivers who need cash on a daily basis. They are probably extremely poor, and they're right on the poverty line, and they need cash on a daily basis. That's why they're coming to Ola and saying, I want to work with the platform that settles my cash on a daily basis. Assuming and it was true, that their earnings per week would be the same, whether it's across Ola and Uber. There's no significant difference for riding on one platform versus the other, right? So just the fact that cash is settled every day brings a certain type of driver who are probably very close to poverty line, and hence they are not as mentally mature. And again, broad brushstrokes here, they are not as mature enough to understand that, yes, I need to not be rude with my customer. I need to provide them a better user experience. I need to keep my car clean and not smelly and so on. They were not mature enough to do that because they're coming from a really impoverished background. Whereas Uber attracted drivers who could survive without cash for a week. So they're in a slightly better position, and it's easier to coach them on the user experience elements like keep your car clean, please speak politely, don't smoke or whatever in the car. It was easier to coach the Uber drivers on such aspects. Now, the point here is something as simple as how frequently do you settle cash can have an impact on customer experience. right?
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, so this is where all the aspects of business come together, your operations, finance, marketing, everything comes together and affects customer experience, right? What was the impact of this entire feature rollout at the end of rolling it out to the entire customer base? Improved by a lot, went from 2.1 kilometers to 0.7, and that was because the drop radius was kept very strict. We loosened it up a bit and it increased to 1.2 or 1.1 kilometers. The utilization of drivers improved by 0.75 to 0.8%, which in effect as a 2x multiplier reduced cash burn by 1.5 to 1.6%, right? So quickly concluding, scaling, as we saw, requires new solutions to old problems, and scaling and agile go in hand in hand when you take one step at a time. Fix bugs at each step. Do not try to go right to full rollout straight from designing or creating the feature. There will be so many problems that you will be overwhelmed, and what is actually a successful feature or a successful rollout will seem like a failure, right? And with that, we come to the end of this presentation, and I can take any further questions as required.
I think that was a very detailed explanation of how to roll out a feature, and what are the challenges you as a product manager, the customers, and different stakeholders can face while a decision is taken care by the product manager. And I think it's a very iterative approach. At the end of the day, as you have shown us, and for the viewers as well, it's a very iterative approach, and it is where I think product manager has to make decisions fast based on the data they are able to have. And it may not be the data which you would always receive in numbers. Sometimes you have to go out of your way, talk to your customers, talk to your drivers, and all maybe conduct surveys to understand what can go wrong, and try to solve that kind of problem. So how much time do you think it took from an MVP to a full rollout, and when did you define that we would want to now roll this out, this feature for all the users?
So we used to take a step every 2 to 3 weeks, right? So from the first 2 locations in Bangalore to say half of Bangalore, and then all of Bangalore and Mumbai. The example that I gave you of the driver saying, please turn off the feature, was because we were at an intermediate step where the problem existed. Remember that if we had stuck to only the first 2 locations in Bangalore, then no drivers would have faced this problem of back-to-back rides, because they're unlikely to be in the same mall or in the same bus station multiple times a day. The problem emerges as you scale. So in a nutshell, in answer to timelines, every 2 to 3 weeks, try to take the next step in scaling, and eventually in about, I'd say, 3 or 4 months, you'll probably take the first set of features live to your entire public.
Amazing. I think that's a good summary of what a product manager needs to do to roll out a feature. Starting from the point where they are just ideating to the point where all the customers of the platform can use it, and it can actually impact the business and the success of the business in the later on stages. So I think one small question which our viewers would want to to know is what are the tips you can give to our users to prepare for product manager interviews. And because you see today that a lot of companies need smart and intelligent product managers to help them build that tech platforms which are needed in the market today, and to communicate with the customer. So we would be grateful to know some of the interview tips which you can provide.
Absolutely. So it's a combination of building a good resume that highlights impact, not work. What do I mean by that? A very, very rough thumb rule is, look at your resume and see if it has ing words versus ed words. What do I mean by that? If you say my job was writing specifications, was rolling out a feature, was looking at metrics and things like that, they're all ing words: writing, rolling out, looking at things, which says this was my job, but it doesn't really give the interviewer a sense of, did you do it well? And so what? Was there any impact to the business? Whereas if you rephrase that and say, and that will force you to rethink, if you rephrase that as, I rolled out this queued allotment feature that improved cash burn by 2%. This is the impact, right? I did this to get this. That the interviewer gets a sense that, okay, this person actually drives results. They are not just working like a machine saying, okay, I do this every day and I don't know what impact my work has on the organization. The resume can be structured accordingly. So that is one part of being a product manager or appearing for product manager interviews. The next is, unlike say tech interviews or almost any other kind of interviews, product management interviews will definitely have a problem solving round where the candidate is given either abstract problems or very concrete problems to solve, and the idea is not to arrive at an answer. These are not problems that can be solved in a 1 hour interview, but the idea is to give the interviewer a sense of how you structure your thoughts and how you would arrive at your problem solution, and what are the open risks that you foresee, and you say that these are all the things that can go wrong. I don't have an answer to them, but we'll figure that out as we go along, right? So I think these would be 2 tips for further deep dive sessions. We could do an exercise or we could do a kind of group discussion, but we can do that in a follow-up session.
Okay. I think it's a great insight, for the budding product managers, and I think people like us as well, who are in the industry, but we are still learning how to be a good product manager. It was a very good session, for all of us, and thank you so much, Arun, for this insightful session on product management and rolling out a complete feature of a product. We wish you good luck. Thanks a lot, Arun. It was a great conversation. Viewers, please write in comments what next topics do you want us to cover. We would love to hear your suggestions. Seekamentor has also planned a lot more interesting for the upcoming week, so stay tuned. Also, to connect with us for one-to-one mentorship sessions and chat further on this topic, please check out the link in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram to ensure that you don't miss out on the updates on the upcoming sessions. Links given below. Thank you from all of us at Seekamentor. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, Ishan.